Hi, welcome to Hillcrest Sermons, growing together.
Show us your heart's delight.
Good morning. Welcome to Hillcrest Church. My name is Christian Lindbeck. I'm the grateful lead pastor here. Delighted to have you with us in the midst of summer. Facts, though, this is a perfect summer day. Right? It's like 65 outside, a little sun. Who's looking forward to rain tomorrow? I'm like checking my radar like it better rain, like it's supposed to come. And I thought, what has happened to me? How has this happened? So great summer, looking forward to rain. Glad to be in the Summer is Better Together setup with you two. Just enjoy what that means online. I want to say welcome to you too. But I do want to say every week, we hope that the online experience is a warm invitation to come be part of face-to-face community as we follow Jesus together in this little kingdom outpost, and we're really glad to have you with us this morning. We are finally beginning to near the end of this series in the book of Luke. Now, of the four gospel accounts, these four biography stories of Jesus, Luke's is the longest, it's the most historically detailed, and it's full of the most kind of complicated knitting together of concepts. So it's been a minute. Like we've been in it for a while, and even when Tim and I wrote this at 21 weeks, we thought we flirted with like 50 weeks. You're welcome. We did not do that. But there's just so much to unpack in there. So I want to express my gratitude again for all those who've helped contribute to this great series and those who are coming up the next few weeks again. One of the things that Tim and I hope you are noticing, stands out for you in the midst of the series, is that our author Luke is fascinated by Jesus. Like he's really, truly, he has spent the time. He's done the research. He's spent the years. Remember, Luke is a later Greek believer, so he came to believe in Jesus on the testimony of others. And Luke's just the more he learns, the more he desires that we would know. He's keen that other people would see and know and entrust their lives to this incredible being whom he's entrusted his life to. That's his whole goal. And I just want to say likewise, for Tim and I, when we sit and pray and think about this, we want to share Luke's goal. We want to be a window through to the breakthrough king. You know, even when I say Jesus, this is a name that we've grown so accustomed to in all kinds of cultural ways. It comes with its own baggage, you know. But this person that we want to show you, this breakthrough God, man, this is an extraordinary being. And so our hope is that as we share these little parts of this vast and complicated and interconnected story, that just like Luke, you're like, I am intrigued. Who is this person? Luke's constantly, who is this man? What do we have to do with him? Now, the problem, too, is kind of doing when you stretch out a series this long, is that we've had to look at it, take a big book, and we're breaking it as kind of like bite-size by bite-size piece. Tim pointed this out last week, like, what do all these little Jesus vignettes have to do with each other? Like a little story about Jesus, little story about Jesus, little story about Jesus, little story about the good father. Like, how do all these things knit together? That's what happens when you have to take these little, how do I do something in 30, 35 minutes? Well, 30 minutes for Tim, like 40 for me. But, you know, somewhere in that window, how do we make these little pockets? And so as we get near the end, we want to begin to transition to helping us see together how Luke has been, he's kind of building. One of the ways I think of it is like he's bringing a collision of themes together. Luke is intentionally ratcheting up a dynamic tension. In fact, several dynamic tensions. And he's bringing them, everything's kind of pointing into the time that we're coming in these final days of Jesus' mortal life. Luke's bringing these tensions together. And in particular, he is bringing tension around this point. Jesus is not the hero they are expecting. They're intrigued by Jesus. They think maybe he is the Messiah, although they're confused around this, fortunately. Jesus is not the hero that they are expecting. He's way better. He is way more than they thought was coming. In fact, from the first introductions of Jesus, particularly the book of Luke, because Luke wants to kind of build these reshaped and exceeded expectations up. From the beginning, he's both been kind of reshaping and exceeding expectations. Like I said, from the first introductions, Luke shows that Jesus' parents knew he was something special, which is not a surprise because they've been told this by angels, prophets, and spiritual family members, right? But they know Jesus is something special, but even they are caught off guard by how extra he is, right? Like he turns out to be quite a bit more than they themselves were expecting. He's better at this point than anybody had dared to imagine. They had hoped, who would this Messiah rescue hero be? What would this national deliverer look like? What's this greater son of David that is to come? Like, what's this person going to be like? And so far, Jesus is reshaping, and he is exceeding all of those expectations. And friends, when I say that, I think this is true for us too. This is true of the neat little boxes that we've kind of put this, who is this Jesus person, this nice guy, leader of our church movement? What we see in Luke, we'll see in particular today, we see in this passage, and we should continually check in our whole hearts, is that Jesus is acutely more challenging than we expect. He's more welcoming than we expect. He's more inclusive and elusive than we expect him to be. He's more controversially sharp at times than fit in our easy expectations. And this is part of the story as him exceeding what people think they will get. And we've seen this play out already in the book of Luke, right? So to the kind of casual follower of Jesus, those who are excited and following along in the crowd, to the casual follower, he extended the formidable challenge of whole life devotion. Right, he turns around, they were following me, he turns around and says, you want to follow me? Then lay down your whole life. Like, pick up your cross, share in my death, pick up your cross and follow me. He bids them to come and die. To the religious elite, to the nationalists, the Israeli nationalists, to the racist, sexist, ableist, and greedy, he brings the challenge of radical love for the other, radical inclusion, radical noticing of the neighbor, humility, counter-cultural love. Like, to those who think they've got it figured out, Jesus turns out to be way exceeds their expectations. We've said this a few times before, where it's something like, anybody like a Jim Gaffigan fan? With the little asides, where he's like, is he really going to do that? Like, is Jesus going to include that guy? Luke's framing this up like, yes, this radical level of inclusion to those who find themselves on the outside, banished, hurt, confused, maybe even damaged by their own choices. Jesus exceeds expectations. He shows himself as the good shepherd who runs out to find those. To those who feel sad or guilty or embarrassed of their own behavior, Jesus shows himself like the father, a good father who runs out after a son. Through Luke, we are meeting much more than like a good teacher or a traveling miracle worker. We're meeting somebody, we want to see this, who is totally good, totally just, has the ability to be honest and gentle and yet powerful and strident, kind and funny and serious all the time. I say this a lot, like this is why every television show that has a Jesus in it misses it. They can't quite capture this person that exceeds expectations in every direction. It's just more than we expected. He is more than we expect. He's more than we make him out to be. And now as we reach the end of the book of Luke, like I said, Luke really wants to kind of ratchet up this tension. So we've got now, Julie just read, the beginning of Luke chapter 19, which is the beginning of Jesus riding into the final week of his mortal life. This week is frequently called Passion Week. So he rides into these final 7 days, passion, not just for what he will do on the cross, but like you see Jesus's real heart. You see, how does he feel about these things? You see the feeling, the emotion, the passion, the strength of Jesus fully. Like if Luke's building attention, you see these things fully on display in this season. Because this time is finally coming. Jesus is finally on his way to Jerusalem to give his life, to restore the creation that he loves, to begin to restore justice, to begin to make all things well. In fact, as far as Luke is concerned, if you are looking for kind of the flow of this book, we're at the beginning of chapter 19, which will carry us to the end, but Luke has had Jesus on his way to Jerusalem since chapter 9. Jesus is like, I know what I need to do. I set my face and my course and my mission unquestionably towards Jerusalem and what will happen there. And now from 9 to 19, for 10 chapters, Luke's been ratcheting the tension and setting the context of Jesus' journey up to Jerusalem. And that's what we're seeing, is this beginning of Jesus finally arriving in Jerusalem. It's interesting, too, because he's already told his disciples at this point 3 times what's going to happen. I'm going to go to Jerusalem. I'm going to be persecuted. I'm going to give my life, and then you'll see the kingdom come. And they still do not get it, because it exceeds their wildest imagination. They can imagine a Messiah king who will restore. They want to see national Israel restored. They want to see the priesthood cleaned up. They want to see God's glory restored to the temple and God's presence. They can imagine these things. They just cannot imagine how he will achieve it. Even when he looks right at, have you ever done this with your kids? Here's what's going to happen, and yet they do not pick this up. This is like he's telling them, and still it so exceeds their imagination that they cannot believe it. This is the season we're coming into. So last week, Tim took us through Jericho, Jesus' journey through Jericho, so we could feel and associate. You're supposed to be picking up these tremendous messianic things that Jesus is doing in Jericho. The blind are seeing. The wealthy are giving away their money. These are like, the miracles of the kingdom coming. So we see Jesus moving through Jericho, and then he's on his way to Jerusalem. We literally pick up on the heels of that story. So I want you to keep the Jericho story in your mind, because it says right after this, as they're still listening, that's 19:11, as they're still listening to the things that he just said, he starts walking to Jerusalem. He tells them this parable on his way. And then the beginning of what we just heard, in verse 20, it says, as he's on his way to Jerusalem, he was saying these things, right? So he's literally beginning this walk, and he's teaching on this walk on his way up to Jerusalem. Now, I am one of these people that agree with a lot of scholars that Jesus intentionally chooses this route. We've said lots of times Jesus doesn't mince a lot of words and waste a lot of footsteps. So when he's going somewhere, doing something, you're always supposed to ask, why is he doing that? Why did he go there? What's going on? And so I believe he intentionally, and lots of people would say this, chooses this route. And I don't know if you can see this. I forgot we wouldn't have our TV here and that I could point to it. But Jesus leaves Galilee. He comes down the Jordan Rift, this like crack in the earth, one of the lowest spots in the earth, comes down this, and then he goes across the Jordan and then crosses back over the Jordan River and enters into Israel on his way to Jerusalem through Jericho. Now, for those of you who have a little church background, you may know this is the exact route Israel takes. This is the route David repeats on his return to kingship. This is when national Israel enters the land, they cross the Jordan River. They stop at Jericho to see miracles of God's provision, and then they proceed up the hill to Jerusalem. This is Jesus establishing himself as the new hope of a new Israel, a restored people. The plan of God that he had from the beginning is now unfolding in the person of Jesus. He intentionally, again, if you can begin to see, like, he chooses the route. He stops in Jericho. He performs messianic miracles. He starts teaching a parable about a return of a king on his way up the mount to arrive in Jerusalem. That's a 3,000-foot journey from Jericho to Jerusalem. Do you ever picture that in your mind? That's like higher than Stephen's Pass, right? So he goes down from the Jordan Rift way up this dusty road up to Jerusalem. Now, when we take our trips, so we lead tours to Israel, when we do this, we intentionally repeat this route. We come down the great Jordan Rift Valley. We take a right, and we stop in Jericho. We pick up provision in Jericho, and we start winding our way up this famous desert road to find ourselves in Jerusalem. And what happens is we reach the top near the Mount of Olives. You come up, 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 and then you crest over the top of that hill, and you go from desert austerity, the Judean desert, like when you go over I-90 and all of a sudden you're in the mountains again. You come out of desert austerity, then boom, the entire city of Jerusalem is laid out before you. This is our last group staying there, but you come out of this, you come over the hill, and then all of Jerusalem is spread out before you. It's really, for me, it's still awe-inspiring. It still often causes me to weep. Sometimes we'll come out of that hill and we'll sing a song. I can see my dad, we'll sing, Jerusalem. I shouldn't sing. Jerusalem, city of God's favor. And as you come over the hill, and all of a sudden, that whole city is spread out before you. This profound city where God has put his ancient fingerprint, this plan from the beginning of time, God's long story, is spread out to you. You can see it from end to end. But this is Jesus' experience. He comes up out of the desert. He comes up over this hill. And in the same way, the temple, he comes out and he can see Jerusalem from end to end. He can see the temple before him. And now, with that context, I just want you to hear, again, some of these words. You see, after Jesus had said this to him, this is the parable about a returning king, if you want to kind of look back at that later. It says, he went on ahead going up to Jerusalem. Now, as he approached Bethphage and Bethany, which are almost near the top, at the hill called the Mount of Olives, this is when he sent two disciples on ahead to go prepare the way, and you heard some of that. And it says, now picking up in verse 37, when he came near the place where the road goes down the Mount of Olives, the whole crowd of disciples began to joyfully praise God in loud voices for all the miracles they had seen. And they sing these words from Psalm 118, blessed is the King who comes in the name of the Lord, peace in heaven and glory in the highest. And some of the Pharisees, these are people who help maintain strict adherence to the law. And the crowd said to Jesus, teacher, rebuke your disciples. I tell you, he replied, if they keep quiet, the stones are going to cry out these songs. It's a reference back to Habakkuk and the coming of God. As he approached Jerusalem and saw the city, he wept over it. So Jesus comes up the same way that we do. He crests over the hill, and he's got this big view out over the city. This is me sitting on the Mount of Olives, and you can see that's the old city of Jerusalem spread out before you. You can see the whole city spread before you. And in the next picture, if you zoom in a little bit, you can see the kind of southern steps that led up to the temple there where Jesus will teach where he'll enter the temple so he can see all of these things spread before him. This place where he had pre-planned, as God himself had pre-planned before the beginning of time, to give his life for the rescue of the many. And one of the precious things that happens in this moment when Jesus comes over the hill and he can see the whole city, let me ask you, what did you notice, even when you've heard it read twice? What's a precious thing that happens in that moment? Jesus looks out over the whole city and he cries. He can see, I have felt this for you. Look out over the city of God's promise, the work that he is knowing that he is going to do. He's finally going to bring to fulfillment the work that has been planned before the foundation of the world. Before all things were made, he has known he's going to walk into this moment. His whole life has pointed up to this week, like the anticipation for the arrival of this moment is cosmically wide. The scripture says the whole universe ached for this to happen. Like the air is like crackling with electricity, and we see this personal, freighted moment where the God of the universe and human form is moved by this. It's a personal and piercing detail. I think that even an obtuse visitor here, like Shlomo from Noma, like from nowhere, could have noticed that how many things are happening in this moment. It's a moment that is freighted with importance. Jesus has been loading this moment up, but certainly somebody who's just there may have noticed everything that's happening. Jesus, over the past 3 years, has a growing reputation and infamy. Right? So people are just, who is this? Who is this miracle worker that irritates all of the religious authorities? You have huge Passover crowds who are gathered all around the city, will be outside the temple and near the Mount of Olives. So you have large crowds assembled all over this area. You've got Jesus's nervous and expectant disciples, right? They're all jumpy, and is this finally going to happen? They're arguing at this moment, like which one of them is going to be greatest? So they're still not quite getting it. You have Jesus's, and somebody who's observant is noticing where Jesus just came from, what he's saying, and what he is doing. But you have Jesus intentionally going back through Bethany on his way, where he recently raised Lazarus from the dead. So you've got him like loaded up. Now he passes through Bethany, makes a proclamation there where he speaks of himself as the Lord, ordains that things will be ready. They're found just as he said. And now he starts coming in, and people are like laying coats over this donkey, like a sign of my life for your life, and coats along the road, and they're singing messianic songs. And over all this, you're going to have people who are like furious agitators. You've got angry religious people who are there to correct him. You've got Roman military police who are stacked all over the place to make sure this does not get out of control. I mean, you have got like the hope of a nation, the pressure of millennia of story. You have got loud songs, loud shouting. You have got like hope, sweat, expectation, messianic images and sounds are happening all over the place. And Jesus walks right into this moment, and I would suggest to you, he knows exactly what he's doing. He is intentionally pulling on each one of these strings. Like he's reaching around him and grabbing all of these images and moments and signs and ideas. Everything that's happening in this moment is a declaration of Jesus saying, I am he. I'm the one you've been waiting for. I am the hope that has been promised since before creation. I am the Messiah rescue hero that was promised by God. I'm everything that Moses hoped for, and everything that Noah hoped for, and everything that David envisioned and saw. I'm his greater son that was to come and have a kingdom forever. I'm the suffering servant that Isaiah saw. I am the one who will unite the nations. Like this is this moment that all have waited for. And I wish that we had time for me to name the many strings that he is pulling here. But there's a couple that should be said. I'm only going to read you a couple of passages from Zechariah. I would commend you reading the whole book of Zechariah so you can be even more shocked about the tensions that Jesus is creating here. Because Jesus is intentionally reaching back and touching Zechariah. He's intentionally reaching back and touching David, handing off his kingdom to Solomon as a symbol of this greater son who was to come. But Zechariah is often called, I'm sure you're in Zechariah all the time, right? Just this morning? No? It's called the most messianic book of the entire Jewish scriptures, right along with Isaiah. It has the most references to the coming king of any other Old Testament scripture. And Jesus is intentionally touching this, and I recommend it with a little caution. I just want to read you quickly Zechariah 9:9 and a little bit out of 14. Zechariah 9:9 says, "The coming of Zion's king," is what it says. This is 500 years before. "Rejoice greatly, daughter Zion. Shout, daughter Jerusalem. See, your king comes to you, righteous and victorious, lowly and riding on a donkey, on a colt, on the foal of a donkey." Let me just skip ahead to 14. I'm just going to pick up a little bit in 14. It says, "About the day of the coming of the Lord." When the days of the Lord are coming, it says, 14:1, "The day of the Lord is coming. On that day, his feet will stand on the Mount of Olives, east of Jerusalem. And the Mount of Olives will be split into from east to west." This massive event. So look, I'm tempted to step off the stage, and I promise I won't, media crew. He is reaching back to say, Zechariah had this long vision through his current context to the end of time. These coming of the days of the Lord. He's literally, "Get me a colt." Why do you want a colt? What's the deal with the colt? Why are you declaring this in Bethany? Why are we going to the Mount of Olives? By the way, why didn't we just come the easy way to Jerusalem? And Jesus is like, the path, the way, the statements, the colt, the coats, the palm branches, the song, all of this, the universe has been awaiting these days from the beginning of time. This is the moment I am riding in to this very moment. And there's more. I wish I could, even choosing a donkey instead of a horse isn't just about Zechariah. It's about David handing off the kingship to Solomon, where he says, "Go get Solomon, my son, and put him on my donkey." Because the Israelites, they don't want to be Rome. Rome rides in on horses, and Luke here is even passionate to show that this new kingdom will not be a military movement, but it will be a different kind of king is coming. If you really want to nerd out for a second, and if you do not want to nerd out, you can tune out and check your phone right now. But if you do want to nerd out, take your finger sometime, keep it in 19, and go back to this parable that Jesus tells about a returning king. He tells this story on his way to being a returning king. He's making two really important points. I am a returning king that will look nothing like Herod. Nothing like his son Archelaus, nothing like Augustus. I will not ride in on a horse with a military victory. I'm nothing like that king. But I am a king who's riding into his kingdom, will apparently be absent for a little while, cares very much about what you do while I am gone, and then will return in victory. And so this parable are they're like a flashlight on what is different and what is similar about the coming of this inaugurated king. A lot of layers. And the how and when Jesus will usher in this eternal kingdom, I just want to keep touching this tension again. Everybody hopes this is going to happen. And maybe even somebody's thinking, the light's turning on, and they're thinking Jesus is the Messiah. I promise you, they do not think he will accomplish it by apparently losing. This catches everybody off guard, because they cannot imagine that the God of the universe will restore justice, begin to make all things well, demonstrate his love and his heart for his people by dying himself for those who were in rebellion. Like they can't frame this. Who would guess that? Who would guess God's going to make all things well? I know what he'll do. He'll break into human space and time, take on human flesh, and die himself, taking on all of my penalty to make all things. Like nobody's going to guess at that. And so this is already these kind of exceeding expectations, and Luke is trying to show us a little point of that even here. Like these, this coming king just isn't. You can't put him in easy categories. And he does that. We ended last time with verse 41, right? Jesus weeps. So we see this, like his heart, like you must be able to draw from this that Jesus has a compassionate, caring, and loving heart. He loves these people, and he loves this city. As he approached Jerusalem and saw the city, he wept over it. But then it's also followed with these words. And he said, if you, even use bad news when it comes from Jesus' mouth. If you, even you knucklehead, even you had only known on this day what would bring you peace. Now it's just hidden from your eyes. And he says, the days will be upon you when your enemies will build up an embankment against you and encircle you and hem you in on every side. Now listen, this is remember I just been telling this loving, unexpectedly loving, gracious, everybody loves Jesus. Now listen, because he says this too. They will dash you to the ground, you and the children within your walls. They will not leave one stone on another because you did not recognize, this is a loaded sentence, the time of God's coming to you. In a moment, you see the passion, the love, the compassion, the graciousness, the unexpected graciousness of God. And you see his ability to declare the righteous judgment of the day of the Lord. And both of these, I think both of these exceed expectations. For somebody who wants to put him in one camp or another, he exceeds both levels of those expectations. He groaned again in Luke 13. I don't have time for it. There's another time where he's coming into Jerusalem and he says, Jerusalem, Jerusalem, you who killed the prophets, how many times have I desired, like a mother gathers her hen, to just pull you in under my wings and protect you. But nevertheless, this is the time that is coming. He holds in his hand this tension that we'll see in the next few sermons is most realized in Passion Week. How could it be that he is the righteous God of the universe who can declare these kinds of words like he just did about the coming judgment of Jerusalem, and also be the unexpectedly good father who runs after the son and does not punish them, who is more gracious, more compassionate, more loving than we could have imagined? This is this tension that we'll see come to play. And it asks the question, like, how should it leave us, the modern reader, feeling? Maybe you're uninterested. That's probably my fault. But I hope that you are intrigued by this is a fascinating person. We're going to be a window through to Jesus. Because Jesus is precisely the good king and leader that the whole world needs. And I hope that even if you're not a Christian, like maybe you don't even have an interest in following Jesus, maybe you're just here because a friend brought you, or maybe you're just curious, I wonder if something in this still resonates inside of you. Does your heart yearn for a leader with the authority to be the leader and the graciousness to carry it well, who's totally honest and totally trustworthy and absolutely just in every circumstance, who has power but is invariably good, a leader who comes with real justice and astounding gracious love? Don't we desire a leader who knows how to say to enough and greed and abuse of the vulnerable and the abuse of God, but can still reach the most hurt, the most damaged, the most banished, and touch them with unexpected love? Isn't this the leader that we hope for? When Tim and I were talking about it this week, Tim said something offhand that really pierced my heart. And he does this all the time. And I'm like, remember when you said that? And he's like, no, I don't even know what you're talking about. He does this. He said, as we were talking it through, he said, Christian, we long for a truly good person to hold the gavel of justice. Isn't that true? In a world that feels broke and unjust, dangerous and unfair, often it feels impossible. How could that be fixed? How could those vulnerable ever be reached? A truly worthy leader who has the strength and graciousness to carry both. And this unexpectedly good leader, this judge of the whole universe, has been benched. Like he's on the bench doing it now, but his way of accomplishing and serving this justice will be shocking. But that is yet to come. I think finally an interesting question hangs over this passage. And the question goes something like this. In the moment, the question is to Jerusalem, how will they respond? Jesus is seeing what might happen, but there is a question like, how will they actually respond? He's still giving them opportunities to respond to him. You know, a matter of fact is we do know, I mean, just from history, in about 40 years, Rome is going to devastate this city. They're going to build up siege. It is going to be brutal. The accounts of it are, they're just atrocious. They're astounding. But not everyone will be lost because thousands and thousands of people will become believers in Jesus. Thousands of Jews will recognize him as the Messiah, and many of them will leave Jerusalem believing prophecies like this and have their life spared. They will hear the truth, they will respond to the truth, and they will behave accordingly, and it makes a huge difference. And I think that question then it just comes right through this passage to us. What will you do with Jesus? How do you respond to this leader of amazing strength, piercing justice, the ability to see right down to the motive of our heart? I think that largely depends on where you're at. And this will be an oversimplification. And I think the youth team can start making their way back up here. But today, maybe you just need to meet or re-meet the radically welcoming, overwhelming, and good love of Jesus. I don't know about you, but I need this reminder a lot. When I feel far away or stupid, when I've let old habits or old thoughts occupy my space, I am shocked over and over and over again about the pursuing graciousness of God. Maybe today you just feel dumb about something. Maybe you've let something get back, a corner in your life, you're like, I just feel dumb and I am too embarrassed to run back to Jesus. Can I just assure you, he is already running straight at you. Like today, hear again about the unexpectedly good grace of Jesus. And maybe others in here, we need to hear his challenge. Jesus does not seem to be inviting casual followership, but a total reorientation of our life found in him, which means all our time, all our affection, all our goods, all our care for other human beings, all of our life is only found in fulfillment of finding our life in him. That's the only way it goes. And walking someplace in the middle may be the most unsatisfying way to live on the face of the earth. The challenge of Jesus is, come find your whole life in me and not middling ground. Maybe somebody needs to hear that challenge again. I just want you to know that he is good, unexpectedly good. His way of creating justice will be unexpectedly good. His invitation is unexpectedly righteous. He is fair. He's honest. He's loving. He's passionate. He's moved. He has the authority and the power and the goodness to do this well. Amen.
Thanks for listening. For more info, visit hcbellingham.com and join us any Sunday, 9 and 11 a.m.